guys, welcome to Educators Roundtable. So we've launched this amazing new series called Rip from the Headlines, where we have education experts from all over the globe go through and watch these videos with me, and we provide feedback on our thoughts. But in your mind, you're probably thinking, this is not happening right now. Yes, happening right now. As one young lady says, in the 20th century. So on board tonight, and I'm so excited because both of these ladies are absolutely amazing. When I tell you they are kicking butt in education, but tonight you might see a different expression on their face because they're going to be shocked, because what we read from the headlines tonight is going to be game changers. So I'm going to say welcome aboard, Dr. Chastity. And I'm going to say, I want to call you DeVoe. Just call you Dr. DeVoe because I like Bill Biv DeVoe, because I be wanting to right. I be wanting to say, but I'll be like, that's just so wrong. Because your husband might be like, I'm sorry, don't take my name, because he might not like Bill Biv DeVoe. But Bill Biv DeVoe. So Dr. DeVoe, welcome aboard. And of course, you guys know Dr. Jones is here. And guys, real talk though, of course, her little one that she just had is around. So don't even ask about it. The baby is there. Look at her. She's like so beautiful. We want her. Oh, so we really do want her. So I'm going to say to you guys, you're talking about I'm every woman. You're looking at her. That's Dr. Holt over there. She is like on the move and still running her company and being a mom and being an amazing wife. So listen, guys, we got a lot to talk about tonight. So I don't want us to not get to everything, because this is going to blow your mind. So guys, I'm going to be honest with you. Tonight's series, we're going to have a couple different videos. So let's get started, because I want to make sure we cover it all.
Your mom is here. Maddie.
Wrangling students after school.
Okay, all right, thanks. I covered a humanities class this morning and taught grammar, parts, and speech.
To get in front of the class, Principal Chris Aguero is doing whatever he can to keep in-person learning going at Austin Jewish Academy.
It's really tough. On a day like today, we have teachers who need to be home because they've had a positive diagnosis.
And with no substitutes available during this tremendous COVID surge.
Almost exclusively we're using parents. Almost exclusively only because they're the ones who are available.
Hey, CISD is also calling on parents and anyone else to fill paid sub jobs ASAP.
Is it better to have someone who didn't have the 30 college hours in the classroom teaching, or otherwise having those kids stay home? And we think that it's better to have them in school.
Tim Savoy said Monday the district needed 281 subs. That's 100 more than the district typically needed per day pre-pandemic. Both education systems have similar criteria to fill gaps.
The bar is not super high, right? Pass like background check and fingerprinting, come through a training, show that they've got the right disposition to think on their feet, make executive decisions.
And for some parents, that's okay.
See you, Solly. See you tomorrow.
I think it's great. I think the parents here are definitely qualified.
I think that it's always going to be best when somebody who's gone to college and is credentialed to do that is the one that's at the front of the classroom. But I understand, days are tough.
Okay, ladies. So my question to you guys is, looking at that video and understanding the shortage that we have in education right now with substitute teachers. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but in this state, and if you're watching from another state, but specifically in the state of Michigan, our governor has approved that the bus driver, the people who clean the building, basically a bum off the street, I hate to say it that way, can come and be a substitute. I guess I'm a little bit appalled, and I'm only saying this because I didn't go to school to be an educator, but I actually had to go to school and pass tests to teach. So although I had a degree in chemistry, which far outweighed a teacher going to school to be a science teacher, and I was a chemist, I still had to go get qualifications to be a science teacher. And then I had to go get my school administrative certification as a grad course as well. So my question to you guys is, what do you think about what's going on?
It's disheartening, right? It's disheartening. I think about it. I don't know that I would want the janitor or the bus driver teaching my student. I don't know, right? Is it about, for the parents that's okay with this? Is it because they need a babysitter, they have to go to work? and so they just need the child out of the house. But
Well,
what
no, in this case, I'm going to tell you. So in this case, what they did is the parents decided to be the sub. That's what they did. And so they were like, that's a better alternative than not having a teacher or having a person like a bus driver or a janitor teach the classes. So I'll be honest with you, I like that idea better. One, because I think kids are less likely to act out. And to me, a parent is going to try harder versus a person, who's not. And so the guy's point is, he says, well, you just have to take a quick little test and do something, and then you're in, right? I don't know. What you guys thought of? Your faces are really kind of like weirding me out. So, Dr. Shelley, what are your thoughts about parents?
So, first of all, I think that a parent is very different from in some ways. It's very different from having, the bus driver, et cetera, but also recognize that our parents many times are the bus drivers, first of all. Second of all, I think that we're in some cases comparing apples to oranges, because what I saw was that was the Austin Jewish community school of some sort, right? And so we got to look back in history at what Jewish communities have been encouraged and enabled to do here in America that many other communities have not. And so many Jewish communities have very tight-knit communities, very highly educated communities, so that if a parent is coming in, it's very different from, let's say, where my kids and my husband work, which is Ypsilanti, Michigan, or where I came from in Del Paso Heights, California, or even in parts of Southern California, where you have communities that have not received the best educations. They haven't escalated or elevated to certain levels. And so it's going to be very different when a Jewish community school is calling on some of its parents, many of which may have, higher level degrees or more higher education levels than the typical school environment. And so that in some cases, that's like comparing apples to oranges. If I was in that Jewish community school, you're darn right. Excuse me, I need everybody to give me an hour, because we don't have, and it would happen because folks would come together, right? But in Ipsy, where, some of the folks are, first of all, struggling to pay their bills on the wages that many of our bus drivers and custodians are making. Like, let's really talk about the wage gap when we talk about educated communities versus people that have not been able to flourish in their education levels and may not have picked up a skilled trade that makes money, like construction management, mind you, not construction worker, construction management, or a plumber who owns his or her own business, things like that. And so, I understand the need, because many folks in our communities do need to send their kids to school because they have to go to work somewhere to be able to pay these bills, because it's kind of a ripple effect. And so if we want to solve the problem in schools, it like many other issues in our society, comes back to, we need to address the wealth gaps in our society. And then you'll be able to have kind of an apples to apples conversation. But in this case, we can't. We can't.
You know what, Dr. Shelley, I'm putting you on a timer for tonight, because I'm telling you
right
now, we're going to miss your whole hotspot topic. When we get to this one, I'm just going to say the rest of these videos will not be seen tonight, because Dr. Shelley's getting ready to take over. And so then basically, Dr. DeVoe, I'm just going to put her on mainframe, because she's going to take over as soon as she sees this hot topic. I just want to be clear. So you know what? I think both of you are correct. I think a lot of school districts will see this and think, okay, well, let's start asking parents. But to your point, it depends on the demographic of your parent. So in our cases, if you're talking about urban education, if any of us were in a district, we're not the norm. That's the difference. You don't have a lot of PhD people running around in schools who are parents right now. Most of us, our kids are in private school, right? Because of what it is that we do. So it's no downer, just real talk. And I can take it back even to my mom. My mom was an awesome mom, but when it came to algebra, trigonometry, she was like, I'm dropping you off at Wayne State. You better ask one of these smart people in the math department, because I can't help you, right? That was just real talk, but she was a good mom. She went outside of the school district to get me help. So what we're saying, people, is this: we're not huffing against what the Jewish community was able to do, but we also want to be realistic of how this looks in urban education. Suburban education, urban education, and rural education are totally different platforms. Okay, so don't start flipping this to let's start asking parents to sub in the buildings. That's all I'm saying. Let's not do that.
And I'm wondering,
right?
And I'm wondering I think if I was a principal or something, I would try to connect, if I would, with the higher education institution that was in my community, right? So you have these teachers programs, you have people who are being trained to be teachers.
Right.
Let's give them some experience, maybe, right?
You
We
know
know
what?
that they have a heart for this, right?
Yes.
They have a heart for this, even if they don't have the skill set yet. They have a heart to deal with scholars. They have a heart to deal with children, and it takes a special person to deal with.
Oh, you're gonna tell me I didn't even like kids before I started teaching. I was in a little protest about it. But my father, who's a teacher, said when you come back here, they're not used to seeing Black women like you in science and mathematics. So you're gonna have to do this. And I was like, they don't make any money. What are you talking about? I'm leaving corporate to do this. And he said, this is your give back. I was so insulted by that. But you know what? You're right. So guys, listen, we're gonna go to a quick commercial break and we'll be right back after these messages. Okay, guys, we are back, and I'm going to tell you this. If you missed the first half, all I can say is I hope you're paying attention for our next upcoming video. In this space, I want you guys to understand what's happening in education. This is not to criticize any particular school district about where they are and what they're doing in their school district. This is so that everyone can see prospectively where we are in education. It's so important that a lot of times we think that we're the only ones that this is happening to. So Dr. DeVoe and so Dr. Shelley, you know, how many times have you guys been in a conversation and everybody thinks it's just a Detroit thing or a Michigan thing? What's your thoughts on
that? I think it's just human nature. People tend to because we don't normalize the struggles that happen amongst ourselves in our communities, because we have not had social media and things like this to talk about this. Many people think that the issues only happen with them. But as you all know, I come from California originally. Yeah. And I've also served in Georgia. I've served in Delaware. The issues are, as our folks would say, everywhere with everybody. Yeah, it's all over. And so that's part of why things like your podcast and other media are so important to help us normalize what's happening, so that we can stop feeling shame, blame about it, stop feeling shame, stop blaming other people, etc., and just realize that this is the state that we're in. And if we don't do something about it, if we don't take charge, who will?
Yeah. And that's so what's your Dr. DeVoe, what's your thoughts on it?
I totally agree. And I think, you know, when it's something bad, it's always a negative narrative around folks of color, right? Communities of color. And so it's like it's this heightened sensation. Oh, look what they're doing in the metropolitan Detroit area. Oh, look what they're doing here. But as we talked about a little bit earlier, this thing is going on across the world. It's a global thing that's happening to our scholars across the world.
So when you say that, and that's one of the things I want people to be clear on, is that when we look at what's happening around us globally, we want to be clear that we're showing a 360 perspective. I think a lot of times we look at the news, we just see us as if it's just an urban education issue and not an overall arching issue within education. And that's so alarming to me, because I work with a lot of school districts, and it's amazing to me how we just circumvently just say, okay, well, it's just them. It's not. It's all of us. We're in this together. We're all in this situation where we're not sure what to do in education right now. And so, like with the rise in COVID, and I'm sure you guys are aware of this, that the COVID situation has gone up, it's gone down. Now we've got this different type of COVID coming up. Kids are returning back to school, and in some cases, we're out publicly not protecting ourselves. So I've said this before, that I really think it's going to shift again, and people just really need to be ready for this, because it's going to shift again. So guys, we're going to share with you our next video, and I'm going to tell you it's interesting, but it's also going to make you frown a little bit. Don't be unhappy about this. That's all I got to say. I'm looking at Dr. Shelley while I say that, though. I don't want you to be unhappy about this whole presentation, what's happening right now. And I hope you guys can hear this too. Let me know if you can or you can't.
But first, international tests are one way of gauging how American children are doing in school compared with other countries. Traditionally, the U.S. performance has been described as mediocre, and this year was no different. The most recent test scores show the U.S. is stagnant in reading and science. In math, our country ranks toward the bottom of developed nations. What these results tell us about educational priorities around the world is a bit more nuanced. Special correspondent Kavitha Cardoza with our partner, Education Week, met with international students to ask them firsthand about the differences. It's part of our weekly series, Making the Grade.
Calvin Leong loves soccer.
I started soccer really young, and I just can't stop playing soccer because it's really fun.
2 years ago, Calvin and his family moved to the US because of his father's work. His mother, Margaret, says if he was still living in his home country, Hong Kong, just like his former classmates, Calvin would have had to give up soccer.
Calvin's friends in Hong Kong have to give up playing soccer because they have to focus and concentrate in their studying.
He says there are only a few universities in Hong Kong, so competition is fierce.
That's why the parents would like them to have extra lessons, even after school, for almost 6 hours. So I think they can balance studying and extracurricular activities here.
Other countries have at times wrestled with that lack of balance, and some have even turned to high-performing US schools for lessons in building student skills, such as creativity and collaboration. But academically, when Calvin moved here, he found general classes much easier in the US.
In Hong Kong, math-wise, it's definitely super competitive, and everyone move in the same pace, so it's pretty hard to catch up if you fall behind. But in America, you can choose your own pace.
Calvin loves the diversity of US schools and says he's made lots of friends, even if many of them don't know where he's from.
When people ask me about Hong Kong, I connect Hong Kong with the Hollywood movies they saw, like the Transformer and the Batman.
Hong Kong is also known for being a place that does very well on international tests. Unlike the US, where the academic performance this year was lackluster. The US ranks in the middle of the pack when it comes to reading and science. In math, it ranked 31st out of 35 countries. The PISA test is taken every 3 years by 15-year-olds from dozens of countries. What makes this test interesting is that it doesn't gauge what students can memorize. In other words, what you can Google. The PISA test looks to see what students can do with what they know.
They are asked to interpret texts, solve mathematics problems.
Andreas Schleicher oversees the PISA test. He says the school systems of today are the economies of tomorrow.
You look at a country like Korea in the 1960s. Korea had the level of the economic development of Afghanistan today, one of the least developed education systems. But it got education right. It became one of the most successful economies. The power of education to transform societies and generate, both economic and social outcomes is just tremendous.
Economic prosperity, international competitiveness, national security. Those are a few of the reasons countries take education and by extension these rankings so seriously. As President Obama said back in 2009, countries that out-educate us will outperform us. The US spends markedly more money compared to other developed countries on education, but by high school, American students fall behind. Schleicher says it's not about how much a country spends on education, but how it spends the money. He says in other countries, it's all about teacher quality.
And I'm not only talking about making teaching financially more attractive, I'm also talking about making teaching intellectually more attractive. And that's probably where the United States is furthest away from some of the highest performing education systems, where you really have a much greater investment in the quality of teaching.
US Secretary of Education John King has one word for the results.
I'd say that we're disappointed.
King says the Obama administration has championed educational best practices. For example, an emphasis on teacher quality and early education. Many states have also adopted the Common Core, which sets high standards of what children should know at each grade. But, he says,
one of the challenges in our system, different from many of our international competitors, is that it is a highly decentralized system. So change takes a particularly long time.
A lot of people say, it's not fair to look at these results and compare us to other countries which are more homogenous.
Sure, we have to be cautious as we look at these results. At the same time, we can look at a country like Canada. It's had a very large influx of immigrants over the last few years and is doing better. We can look at countries around the world like Poland, which is a country that has significant population of low-income students, and yet they've made a lot of progress over the last decade, and we should ask why.
Julia Kempster and her family moved from New Zealand to Maryland earlier this year. She gets asked a lot of questions from classmates.
Can you talk for me? Can you say the number 10 for me? Is it true that there's one person to every 65 sheep?
School is very different in the US. More students, more tests. But the biggest difference, Julia says, is in New Zealand, she had to interpret and analyze information a lot more.
Here it's like you get everything from the book. It's like the facts of the facts, and there's lots of dates you have to memorize because everything's like very important, and it's not a lot about what you think, but what's in the book.
Despite the
Okay, ladies. What are your thoughts? Dr. Shelley, we'll start with you. Oh, you're still on mute. You're still on mute. Oh, you're still on mute. Okay, Dr. DeVoe, we'll start with you.
Am I not on?
Okay, there you go, Dr. Shelley.
Oh, now I'm there. Okay, what I said was, I'm about to go to church, are you right? Because
well,
this
and by the way, this is not even the one that I know you're going to go full rock star on. This is
goodness. So, like, the thing that they're talking about here is the fact that we have to go back to the history of public education in America to understand why it looks the way it does, and it is designed to do exactly what it has been doing. And really, because the history of public education in America was not meant for people to think, it wasn't meant to develop free thinkers and to develop critical thinkers. It was meant to develop factory workers and people that were going to help to move forward a democratic society, right? Our original purpose of education was to study the Bible, to really be able to follow the law. And then as America was formed, because that goes back to the 1600s, when you look at the later 1700s, when America was formed, it was to make sure that everybody knew the laws and regulations so that they could be productive citizens in a democratic society, right? Nowhere in there do you say we want critical free thought. We want to give you information and have you wrestle with it. It's no, we want you to understand these facts, these dates, these white men were the important ones. Everybody else is not important. And that's what the purpose of education was. So when you have young people who come from other countries where the expectation is not that, Of course, you're going to see these discrepancies. It is no wonder that we are 31 out of 35. And when it comes to Michigan, and those same exact PISA results, let me just put it out there for you. Michigan is the worst place in America to learn to read if you are Black, the second worst place to learn to read if you are white. Thank goodness for West Virginia, right? And so when we start talking about not only are we low on these charts, but then where Michigan is even lower, and yet we're having conversations about what history are we going to teach. Are you kidding me right now? So we've got to really get serious about what it is that we want the education system to do. And it can't do everything. It can't maintain the same status quo. If we want new kids to do new things and better things, we're going to have a new way of instructing. And when it comes to the educators, our teachers are great people, but remember, they're also products of this system. And so even though the Common Core standards shifted, they haven't really been taught to think and do things in a different way. They have been taught to be automatons. Here's the book. Here's what you're supposed to teach. Here's the test we want the kids to pass. Go make it happen, Captain. Instead of, this is how we want kids to think. Now, what ways do you believe are the best ways to bring that out? And quite frankly, if I were just to put this out there, that's why teachers are so frustrated right now, and why the occupation is not appealing to people. No one wants to go and be, just somebody else's puppet. But if we were to actually make it about thinking, I wonder what would happen.
And I'm going to say you're right, because they are a product of this environment. And so how can you think outside of the box when you've been in the box the entire time and you think that's the only way? Michael, thank you so much for your support and joining us tonight. He said, you better say it, Dr. Shelley. Nothing to do with a real education, just followers. And so it's kind of like a sheep situation in that case. So I'm going to tell you guys, this is definitely a huge issue, not just here, but all across America. And so I'm going to jump right into, give me 1 second. I want to go right into our next one, because I'm going to tell you, Dr. Shelley, I just want to say, be ready. Just be ready. I can't tell you any more than that, because I know you will knock it out the park. You need to come on next week. It's going to be hot too.
Critical race theory is a way of thinking and teaching about America's past and present by looking at the role of systemic racism, what we've just been discussing. But the very term itself, critical race theory, has become a political flashpoint across the country, especially when it comes to how to teach young people about justice and equity in America. As Amna Nawaz reports for our Race Matters series, the debate over its potential role in school curricula has set off a firestorm that has roiled school districts and state legislatures nationwide.
It's already over. It's not over.
Next year, Jameson Maddox will be a senior here in Loudoun County, Virginia. His favorite subject is history, even though he felt Black history was lacking.
I think there could be some things that happen in history that should have been taught.
In school, did you learn about the Tulsa Massacre?
No.
Did you learn about Juneteenth?
No.
Do you feel like those are things that should be taught as part of your formal education?
Definitely.
Jameson's mother, Vanessa, agrees.
This is American history. All of it should be taught in a certain context and also age appropriate.
Maddox, who works as a job recruiter, and her husband raised both their sons in this affluent Northern Virginia suburb over the last 2 decades. Last year, as the national racial reckoning resonated here, Vanessa joined a Facebook group pushing what they see as anti-racism efforts in school.
When I saw the anti-racist parent group, I'm like, okay, I got to be in that.
What spurred you to join that group in the first place? What has that been like?
There is a definite need for a group like this. I like to be surrounded by like-minded, fair-minded, equitable people. You don't have to think like me. You don't have to be like me, but you do have to be anti-racist.
Not everyone in Loudoun County sees it that way.
There were parents that were just sick of it. They were just sick of, constantly being told, if you don't agree with me, then, you're a racist.
Ian Pryor's 2 daughters are in elementary school here. He's a former Trump administration Justice Department spokesman, now leading a group called Fight for Schools, a political action committee pushing back on equity and inclusion measures.
We're not about not teaching history. We're about teaching history in an objective way that is not represented as America is systemically racist.
When you're looking not at individual acts of racism,
but the systemic racism that exists within America's educational institutions. What would you suggest be done right now?
So there's a balancing act here of making sure that there's equal opportunity for all, that we're committed to meritocracy, but also that when we are trying to figure out how to deal with any kind of social problems, we do not overstep and overreact.
There's 2 signs right here. Parents who agree with Pryor are now part of a growing chorus opposing what's known as critical race theory, or CRT, often a graduate level framework that examines how the legacy of slavery and segregation in America is embedded in legal systems and policies. The thing is, critical race theory isn't being taught here, but that didn't stop dozens of parents from flooding a recent school board meeting to protest it.
The critical race theory has its roots in cultural Marxism. It should have no place in our schools.
I will do everything I possibly can to fight to the bitter end until you prove to me that you are not teaching my children that they are racist just because they're white.
That outrage echoes messaging ricocheting across right-wing media.
Critical race theory is racist. I don't see critical race theory, in our Declaration of Independence.
Much of this can be traced back to a September 2020 directive by then-President Trump, instructing agencies to identify and halt funding of anti-bias training for federal employees that suggests, quote, the United States is an inherently racist or evil country. On his first day in office, President Biden used an executive order to revoke the Trump administration's action.
When I hear the talk of critical race theory, I immediately get a signal. It's an alarming system for me because it's a misrepresentation and misuse of the word.
Jalea Lyles-Dunn is the Director of Learning for Justice, which offers resources for teachers to create anti-bias learning experiences.
Culturally relevant, anti-racist instruction models needed. We need a classroom set up, so not just instruction, but we also need a space that lets children know you are welcome here. Inclusive education is a space where we all are at the table together. We all hear everyone's story.
The debate over which stories are included and how they're taught has fueled pushback. Critical race theory is now being leveraged as a catch-all phrase by opponents of equity and inclusion efforts in public education. In May, House Republicans denounced it at a Capitol Hill press conference.
Critical race theory is a divisive ideology.
As did former President Trump at the North Carolina GOP convention this month.
The Biden administration is pushing toxic critical race theory and illegal discrimination into our children's schools.
Nationwide, Republican lawmakers are now legislating on the idea. According to EdWeek, as of June 18th, 25 states have introduced bills or taken other steps to restrict education on racism and bias. That includes 5 states, Texas, Idaho, Iowa, Oklahoma, and Tennessee, where bills have already been signed into law. Arizona's proposed bias teaching bill could mean a potential $5,000 penalty for teachers. Texas's bill, effective September 1st, says teachers cannot be compelled to discuss current events, and if they do, they must, quote, strive to explore the topic from diverse and contending perspectives without giving deference. Some educators, meanwhile, are holding Teach the Truth rallies, fighting what they call unwarranted legislation.
I think we're raising up future voters who will not have a well-rounded perspective on their own community and society.
Valerie Wolfson teaches 8th grade social studies in New Hampshire, where a new bill would prohibit so-called divisive concepts related to sex and race from schools.
Teachers would be under pressure for severe censorship or fear of that public judgment. It's set up for people to report on you.
And you think it could have a chilling effect on what people teach in their classrooms?
Completely.
Back in Loudoun County,
When you talk about critical race theory, which is pretty much going to be teaching kids how to hate each other, how to dislike each other, that's pretty much I don't care what you say, it's pretty much what it's going to all come down to. You're going to deliberately teach kids, this white kid right here got it better than you because he's white? You're going to purposely tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed. How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed? How do I get, first of all, sign up. We've only got 5 minutes now. 5 minutes. 2 medical degrees. No mom, no dad in the house. Worked my way through college. Sat there and hustled my butt off to get through college. You gonna tell me somebody that looked like all y'all white folks kept me from doing that? Are you serious? What's sickening about this whole thing is what y'all doing right now.
All right, ladies.
Something
all right. So what's your thoughts? Dr. Shelley, I'm starting with Dr. DeVoe because Dr. DeVoe, once she talk, we just gonna sit back. I'm about to get me a margarita. Dr. DeVoe, what's your thought?
I have so many questions, right? I just have so many questions. So for the people in watching, I work in higher ed. And so are folks teaching critical race theory like in K through 12?
So Michigan is one of the states who adopted the concept of doing critical race theory. Now, how far we've gotten with that, not really sure. Did you hold up the book? Hold up the book again.
So here's my thing, and why I asked the question, and why I asked the question. I didn't learn about critical race theory until my PhD program. I wish I would have learned about it sooner, right? But that's why I'm asking, like, are they teaching this in K through 12? So that's where that question comes from.
Dr. Shelley is going to hit that real hard in a second. So outside of that, so what you're saying is until you start doing your doctoral program, you were not aware of it. And it's so funny because I've been aware of it since last year or the year before when they were thinking about making it a law and putting it into law. So what's your thoughts about the video that you've seen in relation to what's actually happening and why this was needed?
Another question. Have they read the book?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think so.
So that is no question. Have they read the book? Because the way I interpreted it, the way I learned it was very, very different. It's not about a divide. It is about, hey, this is how this country was built. And because this country was built this way, certain people have privileges and certain people do not. And these privileges that these people have, these certain group of folks have, is embedded in their laws, right? And the way that we design policy. Even the way that our cities are segmented, right? And segmented in terms of race, where folks live at.
I'm sorry, did you also throw in our tax laws? Did you? Oh, okay. I just want to say that because the people at the bottom pay more taxes than the people at the top, but you make a lot more money than me. But we won't get into it. This is not my platform. This is for you guys. Okay, so from your perspective, if people actually read the book, then this conversation, because it was so funny how they were on the same page but not on the same page, but then their interpretation of critical race theory was a lot different when they should have been similar.
Yeah, right. And especially the last gentleman, I would just want to hug him. I put myself through school. I did. So let's, I would like to talk to him. Let's unpack you putting yourself through school. Let's unpack the reason why you don't have parents in your household, right? What I would like to know, right? I would like to know what happened to his parents. Why weren't they in the household? Did you grow up with your grandmother? Did you grow up in the system?
What about,
how did you get in the system? How did you navigate that?
So Dr. DeVoe, look at it from this perspective. Why is he against critical race theory? I think his interpretation or his understanding of critical race theory is like if you have read or some more literature on it, maybe you would have a better perspective, right? Okay, so Dr. Shelley, this is just real talk. I wish I could take us out the frame because I know you about to tear it up. So, Dr. DeVoe, just go ahead and get you a milkshake or something. We could just.
Girl, you already know. So, first of all, let me just break something down. I want to say we're going to keep saying it because Ed Kaminui's research on the ways that we interpret knowledge say that we need to hear and experience things 14 to 40 times for the general education adult before it makes sense in our heads. So I'm saying this several times for those of us who still haven't heard it the 14 to 40 times, or who may be special education service needing like myself, and we need to hear it a lot more. But let me just say it over and over again that critical race theory is not something that is taught in schools. It is a concept that people learn about typically in higher ed because of the way it plays a role in the way society operates. I didn't learn about it until my undergrad work. Thank goodness I had Dr. Pedro Noguera. I had Dr. Wade Nobles. I had Dr. Harry Edwards at UC Berkeley. who introduced me to these concepts in a way that it never created division in my heart or in my mind or in my soul. It helped me to understand why things were different for me than they were for other people. And it wasn't anything about me not working hard. God bless that young man who said, I worked hard. We all have worked hard, as have people who identified as white. But critical race theory, and particularly privilege in our society, is not about what you did do or what you did experience. It's what you didn't have to experience, because there were plenty of people who have multiple medical degrees who did have two parents in the home. There are plenty of people who had two medical degrees who, what Dr. Chastity just said about, I want to know a little bit about his story, because through his story, we can help him understand where race has played a role where that other things for him, where it hasn't played a role for others.
Right.
And
but
so,
Dr. Shelley, wait, before you go any further, explain to people the difference between not teaching all of American history versus critical race theory. And I think that's where the confusion is for that young man.
Exactly.
And everybody
so
else.
critical race theory
Before you answer the question, I want them to understand right now, we're not teaching American history or world history. We're teaching white history. We need to teach all of history. And so explain to them what the difference is from that capacity, because I think a lot of people who are watching, I want them to understand what really should be happening versus what is happening in per that video. So go ahead. There you go.
So essentially, what we have learned, and all of us learn in history, because the way the educational system and our society in America, remember, America is a young country relative to many of the others that have existed, especially those in Europe and Asia, and on the continents, I say again, continents of Europe, Asia, and Africa, which are made up of several different countries, many of which perform better than us on the PISA, just saying. So when you look at the age of America, we are a little over 200 years old. We are a baby country, right? And this country, unlike many of the others that we're speaking of, was founded on a system of oppression that was racially driven. Many of the other countries don't have that kind of history. Many of the other countries have a system of oppression still, but a lot of it is hierarchically driven. It's driven by socioeconomics. It's driven by who your parents were and generational poverty. Versus race. And so it's very different. There have been accepted levels of or expectations of oppression in most of the societies that we know of, most of the civilized societies. Don't believe me? Just go watch Bridgerton, and you'll see that there are people that are in Bridgerton that are going to the galas, and there are people in Bridgerton that are serving at the galas.
By the way, everyone, Bridgerton can be found on Netflix. It's an amazing story, and it's written by Shonda Rhimes, who is now 100% with Netflix. We got to support his sister.
Yes. So and it does a great job of taking race out of the equation, and you could see where socialized and hierarchies play exactly.
If you and take race out of it, it's a different type of conversation. So
the conversation's still there. Like
it's still there, but
it's have and have-nots.
Yes, it's the have and have-nots. So Dr. Shelley, explain to them what critical race theory is versus how they're interpreting it. Thank you.
So critical race theory is what they're really talking about is racialized historical literacy. And so there's a difference between critical race theory, which is a theory about how race has driven power systems and systemic oppression in American society in particular, but also globally, and then teaching racialized historical literacy, which is what folks are trying to do. They're saying that we need to teach history from more than one perspective. And all of us, myself included, learn history from the white, male, cisgender dominant perspective. We learned it that way because that was what it was designed to do. I'm not saying that was good or bad. What I'm saying is that is what is. And what we're saying now as we move forward is we need to include the stories of women. We need to include the stories of our LGBTQ populations. We need to include the stories of our Japanese, Chinese, our Irish, our Polish, and our African American ancestors. We need to include everyone's story. So we're not just telling a single narrative.
I'm sorry, Dr. Shelley, we do. We just talk about, Carver, Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King. I'm sorry, but
And that's
before we go any further, I want to say, Dr. Mason, thank you so much for joining us. She said absolutely correct. It is not being taught in K-12 schools. 82% of the classroom teachers are white women who do not have the knowledge of CRT. And she's correct. So thank you so much, Dr. Mason, for joining the conversation. I'm going to tell you right now, the way we learn African American history is one chapter, and we highlight like 6 people. If I only attended school and read only the books related to that, I would have never known anything else about anybody else in history. And I'm going to say to you, that's the big. When she asked him about Juneteenth, he was like, "What is that about? What happened in Oklahoma? Oh, what is that about?" See, those are the things that I'm deeply concerned about. Like, do you understand a lot of the technology we have now, the roles that minorities played in order for us to have technology where it is today? The cell phone is huge, and people have no idea that a Black person had anything to do with cell phones. It just kind of freaks me out a little bit. So when we talk about from that perspective, and I know you, and by the way, Dr. DeVoe, you don't know this, but she is, when I tell you, she has this amazing curriculum. And when I say rock star, so can you please tell people what it is that you do? Because I want people to understand, if you don't have access to African American literature or curriculum, please reach out to Dr. Shelley Jones Holt. If you can't get to her, get to me, and I'm going to get you to her, because you've got to get this curriculum in your school. So there you go. Hit it right there. There you go. That's your opening.
So what we teach is cultural proficiency. And what we teach essentially is a journey to journey to liberation. Sorry. And what we have to understand is, first, we need to understand everyone's history, because it's not just African American history that we don't know. We don't know Japanese American history. We don't know Chinese American history. We don't know Italian American history. We don't know Irish American history. We don't know. I could go on and on and on and on, because some of these groups clustered themselves together and called themselves white in order to be Americanized in society. And so they lost their culture. Then you have, kind of the silent Asians and the semi-silent Latinos who are saying, I don't know if we want to be involved in that, we're okay. And then you have Black folks who have oftentimes will have a few token folks that will be allowed to share about, as long as they've been approved, and only the parts of what they're saying that make people feel good. At the end of the day, we're never going to feel good about. There's a reason that we don't speak of any of the Native American history, and all we see is teepees and some basic stuff about like fry bread when it comes to our Native American cultures. When it's like, whoa, let's talk about what conquering and oppressing a group of people means and looks like. Let's talk about what that time looked like, and then bringing a set of people over here who did not want to come to work and toil the lands, because the people that were here were not, quote unquote, strong enough to circumvent or overcome the diseases that came, and they weren't strong enough to overcome that. And so now we have this narrative that we're working on that, America is great, et cetera. And it's like, well, wait a minute, hold on. Let's really understand that. And so what we do with the journey to liberation is we, first of all, without shame, blame, or victimization, that is the most important piece of the work that we do. We start talking about racialized historical literacy in the context of cultural historical literacy. So there are a lot of different cultures that were involved. Then we move folks into cultural proficiency, because part of the reason that you see the folks that are getting all upset with one another is that they're realizing that there is a different story that was told that they weren't told. And that makes them feel some kind of way, because they're not used to accepting, recognizing, and responding effectively to differences among us. That's cultural proficiency. And so that's one of the big pieces. Then we can move to equity. And so notice, I just talked about a big piece, racialized and culturally, historically accurate history, moving us into being culturally proficient and being able to recognize and respond to our differences, and then moving into equity. And equity is essentially getting people what they need, when they need it, in the way they need it delivered. Well, we can't get people what they need, when they need it, in the way they need it delivered, if we don't understand who they are. And that's what the first part of the journey is about. Then you can move to anti-racism, and that's the policies, the laws, the systems, like Jim Crow, like 3 strikes, like, I could go on, even parts of the Emancipation Proclamation.
Dr. Shelley, we need to have you come back every week, because I'm going to tell you right now, every week we're covering something relevant to
the journey to liberation.
Honestly,
Let me finish explaining it, and then you can real quick, because then we move into anti-racism, and that scares people because now we're going to talk about the laws and systems that were created that have impacted multiple people in different ways. Then once you get through anti-racism, then we get to liberation. Liberation is a form of freedom where we think because we're physically free and the shackles have been taken off, we are actually free, but we're not. Every one of us is still shackled in some way because we cannot be authentically who we are, and we can't be in spaces where we can respectfully disagree because we have not been liberated. And so we've got to all be liberated to get there. And that's what I just wanted to get through to folks is as you go through our courses, and we have one coming up next week that's starting on our book study. And again, give me a call. My goal is not necessarily to make as much money as I can. It's to get the word out there and support people. If you want to be a part of this, we want to have you.
I love you. You said it's not to make as much money as I can. It's just to get
I can make money. I mean, this is easy. That's not hard. But getting folks that want to do the work, oftentimes because of the way the systems of oppression have operated, the wealth distribution is so off its kilter right now that it's hard for folks. I mean, think about who COVID hit the worst. Yes, it hit certain races, but it also hurt certain demographics. Our rural people struggled. Our rural folks struggled. Our suburban folks, struggled a bit, but our urban folks really felt it. And that had to do with how closely together people are, right? And how closely together people are has to do with history. You got to know history, right? And so that's what we want to help people understand.
I'm going to tell you, I have to share this with you guys. Dr. Shelley is going to be coming back. Our new series is about talking about things in the headline. And Dr. Shelley, last week, I just want to say, watch last week's podcast. We talked about a school district that did a slave trade of African Americans online. The students, don't play with it. This just happened. This is this year. They put African American students online. It was an online African slave trade. I mean, African American. Yeah, they were selling black kids. But because I just want to tell you right now. So this last one, we're going to end tonight's podcast on something. Hopefully we can all laugh at, but it's not a laughing moment, but it is a moment that you have to say what's really happening on these when the kids are being taught. I'm just going to say, as a parent, I'm appalled right now. I should stop laughing because this is a serious moment. So here we go.
School student accused of attacking a teacher likely will not face charges because he's too young in the eyes of the law.
Sorry.
Local 10's Ian Margold.
Let me go back a little bit. I have to go back to, that's not the story that I wanted to share with you guys. Give me 1 second. The story I want to share with you guys is coming up next. And when I say, I just want to say, I think everybody, if you don't know what's about to happen, I apologize in advance. This is not representation of teachers in totality. Okay. I just want to say that. All right. Here we go. Why did Dr. DeVoe grab her face? What is
school
she showing
teacher
us?
was sucking the nipple of her boo thing while teaching on Zoom. I've tried to keep it together. Here it is. Let me tell you what did it for me. It was the little shimmy she did afterwards. Go back to that. I don't know if y'all caught it. Now, damn it, that's a happy nipple sucker. All right? Let me give you some background to this story. Leave it up to you how you feel about it. Manhattan teacher was initially yanked from teaching because all of this happened in front of students. She was on Zoom. It was recorded. She was sucking a man's nipple. It is what it is. Okay? A student recorded the moment, shared the 11-second video. They shared this on Snapchat, and naturally it went viral. All right? So let's put up a picture of the teacher. Her name is Amanda K. Fletcher, 37 years of age. She has been a teacher for 14 years, has taught at high-performing schools. Good for her. She was at the Columbia Secondary School for Math, Science, and Engineering, a college prep school when this happened. Fletcher may not have realized she was on camera at the time, but she was reassigned 2 weeks into the school year after the incident, which took place originally in 2020. According to the New York Post, the Department of Education removed Fletcher from Columbia Secondary School for math, science, and engineering amid the COVID-19 shutdown in October 2020 after investigators found she engaged in an inappropriate sex act while remotely instructing her class. During the lesson, Professor Fletcher, as students called her, Professor Fletcher, as students called her, sat at a kitchen table eating spaghetti with a shirtless man standing behind her. Now, what has the world come to when you can't teach a class with a bowl of spaghetti in front of you and a guy with no shirt on? I mean, what could possibly go wrong here? All right. She appeared to suckle. This is what the New York Post calls it: suckle on the man's nipple while rocking back and forth. Then turned to the camera, smiled, and wiggled her shoulders. The Special Commissioner of Investigation for Schools, City Schools, reported one mom did complain to the administration about Fletcher returning. The principal, let's put up a picture of the principal. Her name is Nightingale. She said that her hands were tied in an email. She said, and I quote, "The decision to return Amanda Fletcher to service was not made at the school level. I cannot change her assignment."
I'm sorry. By the way, everyone, my laughter is not indicative of the fact that I don't think this is a serious matter, but we all have to find some type of humor in this. Okay, so, Dr. DeVoe, I'm going to start with you. We already know where I'm at.
I have to believe down in my heart, in my soul, in my spirit that she thought that her camera was off. I got to believe it. I got to believe that she thought yeah.
Okay, but here's the question. Even right now in this moment, we're all on StreamYard. Would you have your spouse, whomever, naked in the same space where we're live broadcasting from, that at any point on camera, you could reach over and suck his nipple, like right in the middle of this? I mean, Dr. Shelley, you got a baby. That's different. You could be feeding her. But you got the camera angle where can't nobody really see. So I'm going to just, you know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying, I don't think my husband would be over here on a nipple situation. I could just do this real quick. What is happening? You in the middle of teaching the class with the kids. And the mama says she just recorded it. Like, what's happening? The nipple suck. I mean, he was in the view of the camera right behind her. He wasn't to the right.
And let's be very clear. He not only didn't have a shirt on, I didn't see pants. Like they were quite low. I was looking like, excuse me now. My investigative eyes, I turned the entire private eye in a heartbeat. I've done enough investigations where I have to watch all this madness. And I'm looking like, well, where are his pants? Mm-hmm. And what are you doing? Like, what are you?
It was a lot happening in that moment. And again, and I can only talk about me. The disclaimer is, people, if you're joining us late, this facial expression is not indicative of the fact that I don't think that this is serious. But I'm going to say to you, in doing research ripped from the headlines, this is minor in comparison to the things that we have pulled. So I can only just pre-warn you next week. If you have a kid watching, please don't, because it's going to be some stuff that's going to blow your mind next week.
Listen, so so what was happening before? I be having so many questions. Like, so what was happening before, right? What was happening before? The camera, like they were working, like,
yes,
they were working on their parts. Yeah, she had to not think.
And so that's the thing. She said that, like she was in the middle of the class. It's not like she had finished the class and then another one was starting 5 minutes later and they just had to take a break and she had to lick a nipple. No, that's not what was happening. She was in the middle of class, turned back, sucked on the nipple, did a little dance like, hey, and was like, I'm back.
Wait a minute. Wait. I want to make sure that I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. So she was like, okay, class, turn to page 78, and then did a turn.
Yeah.
Came back.
Yeah.
And was like, all right, are you all on page 78 now?
Oh, yeah. And so that's the thing. Like, even right now, if something came up for any of us, we would just remove ourselves. The video, we turn your video off. So my concern is, at this point, have we just become so desensitized to we have children in our space, even though they're in your home, they're not technically in your home. They're virtually in your space. So you're still their teacher. So there's a certain sense of, I don't know, expectation that you're going to handle yourself between this hour and this hour as, Professor Fletcher. I mean, what's happening?
Dr. Chastity, Dr. Chastity's just done. For me, I think it speaks to the level of professionalism that has or has not been garnered in the educational system in general. We have slowly but surely allowed the profession of educators to honestly become, in some senses, a mockery. Part of what my challenge when I was superintendent was, and I just have a personal issue with this, is that when you come to work, you should be dressed like you're coming to work as a professional. It is very hard for me to take you seriously as an educator and you're walking around like you should be in your garden right now. And so let's look at the trajectory historically of what has happened with the teaching profession. We're talking about a profession that at one point, when women became pregnant, it was considered inappropriate. And we were removed from the profession, where we had to wear stockings and dresses, and men had to wear suits and ties, etc. And then slowly but surely, we've allowed this to in the name of, I don't know what, I'm not going to speak to all levels of it. I do understand more than I'm saying right now, but in the name of freedom and, freedom of expression, we've allowed professionalism to, in many cases, be redefined, particularly in the teaching space. And we have to return a sense of decorum and professionalism to our profession. It's kind of like a cart before the horse thing, because I hear this a lot from educators where they're saying, well, pay us more. We want to be treated as professionals. And then on the other side, people are saying, well, act like one. Dress like one, be a professional. And so, it's kind of like a chicken or the egg thing, like which one is going to happen first? Are we going to return decorum and professionalism to the profession, or are we going to expect, and then, of course, expect the adequate amount of compensation? Or are we going to continue to compensate people at the level that we are and expect, all these higher level things? And so I think it just speaks to the decline of professionalism in the profession in general. And, I was often taught, if you want to get respect, you got to give respect. And so when I teach my courses, oftentimes, I have all of my material. My husband is nowhere to be found. Not only is he nowhere to be found, and my kids are nowhere to be found, we schedule our entire day around the fact that this is a serious matter right now. I need to teach. And I need everybody, and my kids know what the expectation is, even though I have a whole slew of them.
Dr. Shelley, how many kids do you have?
8 that I have, 6 that I birthed. I have 2 free gifts with purchase that came, with my marriage. But as you know, sometimes we would buy a little extra just to get that little free gift, right? And so I just don't understand how that could even happen. For one, that being said, I do understand how Zoom blunders occur, because I've had my share of Zoom blunders where I didn't mute and I'm hollering at one of my kids or something like, hey, didn't I tell you to clean out that toilet like I told? Hi, how are you? I mean, my husband and I had a whole, in the beginning of all this, we had a whole discussion, a very heated discussion, let's say. And I didn't know that we were off mute. So I get how blunders can occur, but blunders occurring that are to me that egregious, where you're engaging in a sexual act. It's like, come on now. That's different from hollering at somebody, or you might say something inappropriate. I've seen people that are going to the bathroom during a session. It's like, well, I mean, it's natural, everybody does it. We need to go, we don't need to see it, but obviously you made a mistake. But your choice of what to do during classroom instruction, absolutely unacceptable. Oh
my gosh, well, you guys heard it from Dr. Shelley and Dr. DeVoe. Dr. DeVoe, do you have any additional remarks as it relates to our teacher sucking on man's nipple?
Listen, once you clarified it for me and given context, I cannot extend her grace. I cannot extend her grace. It is exactly what you said. My office is in the basement. Hey, I'm about to go live. Don't come down here. And also, I closed the door and I pushed something up so they can't get in here, right? So if you hear some rattling, then that's somebody coming to kidnap me.
Okay, so let me ask you guys a question. You see, she taught at one of the highest performing schools in Manhattan. do you think her inability to decipher what's inappropriate for students automatically was related to her ability to teach efficiently or effectively in the classroom?
I don't know if it had anything to do with her teaching ability. Her judgment is of question. And, you know, there are people who have very poor judgment in life and make poor life decisions, but are excellent educators and vice versa. But when your judgment in life starts to impact your profession, you've got a problem, sweetheart. You've got a problem. If you can't keep it together long enough for the 45 to an hour class before you get your groove on, then you've got a problem and you need to seek professional assistance.
You need to seek professional help. And so Dr. Mason, again, she said Children Protective Services would have been called regarding sexual exploitation of children. And I'm going to tell you, that's one thing that they did not state in that broadcast, whether or not outside of her being suspended, you know, and sent to a different school district, whether or not there was any other repercussions for her actions. And I'm going to go ahead.
And trauma counseling for those children, right? Like, so how old were the students? So listen, I would
high school. They were high school.
My age right now, if I saw that, like,
well, the only thing I can tell you, next week you're going to see a lot more than that happened on Zoom. That's all I got to say. So stay tuned for next week. It's going to blow your mind what's happening on Zoom during class time with these teachers. And the only thing I can say is, I know, again, we're allowing people into our private spaces, but it's just like what you guys are saying. Dr. Shelley says when she's teaching, it's everybody needs to be in a different part of the house. I need to focus. You know, Dr. DeVos said the same thing. Like, I go in my office, I close the door. I have a work office, which I'm in now, and I also have a studio that I do my other podcasts out of. And I'm going to tell you, when the light is on, it says on air. That means I'm on air. Don't do it. Right. So, and that means nobody's in this space. Right.
But I mean, and that's not to say blunders will not occur. I'm not, I'm not saying that won't happen. But what I'm saying is the kind of blunder that is. I mean, let's be honest. There are things like, if one of my kids comes in and says, "Oh, I cut my finger," like, that's very different. Like, my apologies, y'all. Let's go have into a discussion. I need to take care of this. I'll be right back. Suck it on a nipple. Come on now. I mean, like, shooting up, doing whatever it is that you do. And come on now. There's no explanation or excuse for the activities that you're engaging in. So the fact that we're moving to a more remote environment doesn't mean that blunders will occur, but we still need to use solid judgment about what we are doing during those times. And that showed to me a complete lack of judgment and a lack of respect for the profession. You've got to be focused when you're teaching these classes. I don't know about y'all, but I mean, I need to be focused during all of my activities, right? Even this one, I need to be focused during these activities. You can't have your focus trifurcated into all these different directions when you're responsible for children's education. Let's take this serious. It is a serious matter. Yes, I'm saying that.
And I wonder, is that the first time that something like this happened with her?
I was gonna say,
is this the first time? Because
I think maybe
it was a little comfortable.
She was real comfortable. She had her little dance. And I'm going to say this. Education is so important with all the different things or various obstacles we're currently being impacted with when it comes to education. For a teacher not to understand that, how can I say this? To your point, every day I went to work, I represented the fact that if this is what you wanted to do, if this was a career choice, this is what it looks like. And as for a person who, I could work in my yard from sun up to sundown. That's like my special place. I love being in my yard. But I knew that the clothes that I wear in the yard, the clothes I wear out when I'm with my friends, the clothes that I may wear when I'm on a date, with my guy, is not the same clothes or look or demeanor or attitude when I come to school. You get what I'm saying? Because you've got to always expect that someone's going to want to mirror you, right? Yes. And the only thing I can say is I remember when I worked at Detroit Academy of Arts and Sciences, and they kept having problems with the kid, and it was a single mom, and the mom showed up to the school. She was a stripper at the club. And the first thing is, they're like, Burkett, can you come upstairs? I said, what's happening? Can you come right now? Security's calling me like the school is being robbed or held up. And I'm thinking, why are you calling me? You're security. And they said, well, you need to handle this, because both of our school administrators were men, and they didn't want to be caught in the office with a woman who came to school dressed like a stripper. They just didn't. They said, Burkett, you got to do this. I said, okay. I said, well, ma'am, can I talk to you for a minute? I walked her to the front door. I said, do you have a jacket or anything that you can put on? Because I really need to talk to you about your student, but I can't talk to you. You're not properly dressed. She looked at me. She said, hey, B, I'm coming from work. You called me. I didn't call you. I said, well, you know what? You have a point. Give me 1 second. I went downstairs and got my sweater that everybody keep a sweater in their office, okay, because it's cold. I went and got my little sweater. Thank God it was one that came down to the knee. I said, but I'm going to need you to put this on and then we can go down to my office. And the first thing I said to the mom was, I appreciate you coming down and I understand what you had to do in order to get here. But also understand that at this point, you went from being your professional person to being your son's mom. And you didn't transition very well. So what I would like to do is I want you to come on a date and time that you're available. And if that means me coming in at 2:00 in the morning, that means me coming, late at night, 8 or 9 o'clock, whatever you need me to do. I want to come where you can be his parent. You know what she said to me? She said, I can respect your game. She came back when
it's absolutely true. Because you treated her like a human being and she recognized that there's situational appropriateness. And that's all part, I mean, I hate to go back there, but it's all part of being culturally proficient. And it's recognizing that in different situations, I have to be different people. And all of us, while we're sitting here as Dr. this and all of that, but, I also ride motorcycles. In my motorcycle crew, I'm known as
She does, everybody, but not with the babies, not with the babies.
Yeah, my husband has an issue with that. I do believe they could ride in the sidecar, but you get my point. That I mean, I have a different personality,
not the newborn, everybody. Not
sure,
the baby.
But I mean, I'm sure Dr. Chastity, when she's with her girlfriends stuff, you have a different way that we are, and it's called situational appropriateness.
Absolutely.
And in that situation, that teacher didn't understand that this is not situationally appropriate on or off camera. On or off. This is not appropriate. And your husband or man or whoever that boo thing, whatever that is behind you, should have told you different too. He should have been, you know what, babe, I'm gonna get this ready for you. How much longer you have? Like, that's where we have to really look at who's around us and supporting us, because we also don't know what kind of situation she's in. And we've all been around women who have been in very tough situations. At the core of it, it has to do with, we have our professional persona, we have our persona that we are with friends. We also may have a different persona when we're with family. When I go to my family's house for Thanksgiving dinner, I'm gonna have to watch my curse words. I'm gonna have to watch this. It's like, I'm grown, but I know, Medea gonna be there, and okay, I gotta make sure.
But you're right, and I'm gonna tell you. So, one of our viewers, and thank you so much for joining us, Melissa Gilmore says, wondering what her rationale was for her actions. That's the question. When you are sucking your man's nipple,
I got a feeling. Sorry,
I'm gonna tell the kids, look, we're gonna have to get out of class early today. This is gonna be a half day on the class. So listen, y'all go do that homework. Right? Because I'm gonna tell you, anything could have come up. It could have been maybe he just got home from the military. I don't know. But the thing is, if it's hot like that, you just got to end the class. All right, everybody, y'all get to that homework assignment. We're going to catch back up tomorrow. So Dr. Mason said, she said, poor judgment under the circumstance could cause you to lose your teaching license and name being placed in the state central registry. And that's so true. And it's so funny to me that this teacher didn't think of any of that when a naked man is standing behind you. Just for that alone, forget the nipple sucking, just for him just being, here you go. Dr. Shelley, did he have pants on? Did he? What's happening? So it's like, honey, you're a teacher right now for these last 10 minutes. We just get the 10 minutes out of you. And then he could, I don't care what you do with your little camera at home, but don't use the school camera with the kids on the Zoom to live out a fantasy. I don't know what's happening. But
it's too much. It's too much. And, Dr. Chastity, I mean, you work at higher ed where, hopefully they're teaching the teachers. And I don't know if you've seen the same decline in not only, respect, but in kind of a reverence for the profession that I've seen. But it's really disconcerting.
You know what? And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about next week in Rip from the Headlines. We're going to really talk about a couple of different stories that we pull relevant to education and the decline of teachers. And their like teachers are now saying to themselves, I'd rather do something else other than teach. I can make more money and have less headache. And I'm going to tell you right now, for a person who did not go to school to be an educator, to get into education, I understand, but then I have a passion now for kids in education. And even right now to this day, I would go into a classroom and teach science and mathematics at a high school level. I'm not in any way turned off by what's happening in education, because it's one thing that I know for sure. When kids know that you are truly there for them and you love them and you respect them, it's a whole different thing. Classroom management is one part, but the bigger part is you got to come in there like a real person that's for them. And that's where I constantly tell people, you need to really keep your eyes open. You can go to as many training sessions as you want on classroom management. I never went to one. I didn't go to school to be a teacher, but I never had any fights in my class. My kids never spoke out of turn to me. I got kids to come to school they would just come to school for my class and skip the rest. Now, mind you, I would tell them, look, now Miss Burkett needs you to stay for all day. If you stay all day, we got $5 on the books. They said, all right, $5, Miss B, I'll stay. I'll see you at the end of the day. Now, mind you, I used to tell the principal, you're going to have to give me a little petty cash up here. I'm
that part
to stay. Okay, so if you getting this much allotment for them to come all day, can I just get $5
and get it? But you know what? We're gonna have to rethink teaching, because what you just said is golden in saying that I would consider going back. And real talk, I would consider going back too. But I'll tell you one thing: I'm not gonna go back 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. But what I teach, a couple of hours on like a Tuesday, Thursday, and just do like an English and a math and science class or an English class or something like that. I would do that. I give you that, right, for whatever it is. And we're gonna have to rethink that, because most folks are realizing, because of how you pay, we're not going to, I would never give you my whole life again, ever. Not today, tomorrow don't look good either, right? And we're considered great educators.
They said that when we talked about international teachers. The thing is, the culture in the U.S., teaching is not respected or paid at a rate where you are respected for what you do. And until they understand, and I've met so many teachers who do have 2 and 3 jobs to support their family, and they still have to do everything else. So I'm going to say to you guys, of course, I knew we were going to run over because Dr. Shelley, you and Dr. DeVoe is on here. I knew it was going to happen. Y'all going to have to come back next week, because it's three things that we didn't even show. We didn't even get to. We didn't even get to the kid who beat the teachers up. They just beat her till she fell out on the floor. She in the hospital. And yes, it's a toddler. The toddler that beat the teacher almost to death. Okay. We didn't even get to. How big was the toddler? Video. We didn't even get to the teacher who was slapping the kid around in the hallway, but when the other teacher showed up, act like, it's the kid. He did this, he did that. When I say to you, we didn't even get to the parent who basically beat up the principal over a basketball game. We didn't get to that part. Because now the parent is mimicking bad behavior in front of his child. And it's just like, what is happening? So what I'm going to say to you, we got to come back next week, because when I tell you that, plus the other, honey, all I got to say is they're ripped from the headlines. There's nothing that I've created, as you see. It's across America. I'm not making this stuff up. We just, my team, we do a lot of research to make this happen every week. So ladies, I'm going to say, of course, I would love for you to come back. Dr. Shelley, can you please show your co-host again?
Oh, my co-host.
Yeah, your co-host. We love her. This is the new baby. This is the new one, and she's sleeping. And she's like, we love her. That's our.
We bored her to death.
We love her.
It's like, yeah.
Thank you so much. We love you and the co-host. Guys, let me tell you something. You got 3 ladies who are from Michigan. So, and we're all from different industries within education. So we're giving you a broad perspective. Dr. DeVoe comes from higher education. I won't name the university because I just think sometimes that's just improper, but I'm going to say to you, she's in higher education at one of the #1 universities in the state of Michigan. Okay. And then you have Dr. Shelley, who was a previous superintendent, and just to let you know, globally recognized for her work in education, who now owns her own company and travels around the country talking about the legacy of how education is being taught, understood, and digested. So it's like real serious conversations, but she is globally known for her perspective, and she comes with literature. So don't fool with her. She got more data in that data bank, honey, than she got kids, and she got 8 kids. Don't fool with her. Don't fool with her. And then I come from the perspective of being an entrepreneur, having IT. I'm the only female-owned IT consulting firm in the state of Michigan. I do a lot of work in education, and I'm just really focused on making sure that people who look like us can make the transition into IT careers. So, and you guys will hear more about that because our company is going to be offering online IT certification courses in over 20 different areas. We're really excited about that, and we're going to be offering it to all the schools. I'm also with another program with Willie Burton, and we're going to be offering STEM, technology, and aeronautic CTE programs to the state of Michigan.
Nice.
So when I say to you, we're coming at this from the front, from head on. And Willie Burton, if you guys don't know who he is, he's a former NBA player. He's currently working on his PhD in education. He's extremely passionate about education. He subs and works in schools right now today, not for the money, but because he wants kids to see who he is and how much passion he has for students. Okay. And he's very serious about it. And I always commend him every day. He goes into a building and just really works with these kids. So I'm going to say to you guys, thank you so much for joining us this week. Again, you know, guys, I'm going to reach out to you as soon as this podcast is over. I need to confirm you for next week because we got some hot topics, some more to cover, some stuff ripped from the headlines. Thanks a lot, ladies, for joining us. And for you guys watching us, thank you so much for joining the conversation. We will see you again next week at the Educators Roundtable, ripped from the headlines.